Well, welcome back to another episode of the Believe in Georgia Tech podcast. We're your co-hosts. This is Jackson Caudell. That is RJ Schafer. And we promised you on Monday we had a special guest coming. And there is nobody else in the world that we would want to have on to talk Georgia State football. 247 Sports, Ben Moore, the Georgia State expert, like everything Panthers. Be sure to go follow Ben on social media. Ben, how you doing?
I'm great, fellas. It's a game week, man. I don't know about y'all, but I was kind of done with talking season in mid-June or mid-July, really. So now that we had actual games, I kind of feel like the appetizer, and certainly not for Tech fans, but that was a massive win over there in Dublin. But just a smattering of games. I don't know about y'all, but I was up watching like Nevada at SMU and flipping around and watching FCS games and things like that. I'm just glad it's here. I'm glad week one's here. Still not sure why they call it week 0, but I'm not a math guy.
Yeah, no, I'm not either. Like I got my degree from Georgia Southern, so my education level is probably just on a little bit lower. So I'm not a math guy either. But I got to ask you an important question as an Atlanta guy first. Will the Braves catch the Phillies this month?
They certainly have enough opportunities. I think that there's an outside shot. Health has not been the healthiest this season. Down over there on Brave Way over there in Battery Avenue. I think there's a shot. I mean, shoot, the last 10 games, if you can replicate that and bottle that up for the next 2-3 weeks, that'd be all right with me and probably most of the folks listening to this. But the last 2 years, the way the division has been, one, and then the immediate exits all around baseball. I think it may be actually a good thing if the Braves are fighting, scratching, and clawing all the way up to that last few days, because that week off has not been kind to any of the division winners. And we've already seen Major League Baseball come out and say we still like it. We still want to give. There's certain games. Basketball's one. Baseball's the same way. These guys just don't need a week off. They just don't. It's not football. It's not the same physicality of it. They're used to having games every day, every other day. I mean, that's why you play 161 games in 150 days or whatever it is, with only a few days off scattered around. So it's going to be fascinating. I'm in tune like most Atlanta folks are. Every win, every loss, but I have to remind myself there's 162 of them. It's not like college football, right? It's not week in and week out. Death by 1,000 cuts. So it's just, I'm not going to overreact to the bullpen blowing, a 6-run lead like they did the other night.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably go like 45 minutes unless we wanted to. But let's get to the task at hand. Obviously, like Ben was saying earlier, Georgia Tech got a huge win last week in Dublin. Now they've got to come over and do, kind of put some demons to bed in the past. They've not done well as big favorites before. They've rarely – I know some people don't pay attention to point spread and stuff, but they've rarely blown teams out. And I think it's just another step in developing consistency within the program. So just a couple of, before we dive into kind of the roster and everything, this is the first matchup between the programs. I just kind of wanted to ask you your perspective. Is this something you'd like to see happen annually? Because I see some people say yes. I see some people just kind of, I don't care type thing. So just as a Georgia State perspective, what do you think about that?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, from a Georgia State perspective, I can tell you they would love to play regularly. I think annually is difficult because football scheduling is done, especially now. I mean, gosh, I think most fans are going to turn on the TV on Thursday night and then again on Saturday and really kind of have to check their phone or check their internet or check a map and see who's in what conference right now. So I think that's the difficult part about it. Regionally, these are the two closest FBS programs. I think, again, anytime Tech and State play, as I wrote earlier this week, there's some incredible connections between not only the football program, but the university itself that go back to the early 1900s. These programs, generationally don't dislike each other. There's a lot of State fans that, grew up going to Tech games. I've told people for a long time, ultimately, if you're a football fan, you're a football fan, and no matter where you move, you're going to gravitate to who, if your team doesn't have a team, which Georgia State didn't until 2009, they're going to root for the local team. So if you did want to root for the University of Georgia or any of the other 5, 6, 7 Power 5 programs that are within driving distance of the city of Atlanta, you probably gravitated to Georgia Tech. and they had success in the '90s and the 2000s, and I've been following it, and most Tech fans have probably only learned on social media just how close it was. I worked for the marketing company that I got to see the 2003 football season with Reggie Ball and Calvin Johnson, and the 2003-2004 season that was a Final Four season. That was special. I'm still friends with B.J. Elder and Marvin Lewis and Ish Muhammad and all those guys. So those guys, and Tech has had kind of an eyeball and a rooting interest. I don't actively root against Tech. But to answer the question candidly, I don't think it can happen annually. I don't think the ACC and its brethren would like that to happen annually. And I can tell you from the basketball series, we saw that with Josh Pastner, and that was initially set with Ron Hunter. If Georgia State wins one of these games, this will be the end of this series for a long time. I tell people this week as well, I was in the building when South Florida beat Florida State in the early 2000s with a Tallahassee native at quarterback for South Florida, and that was a seismic victory for that program. As we saw, they ascended up to the number 2 ranking in the BCS, and then have kind of flown back, and they're building back again. But Georgia Southern and South Florida have a lot of similarities, right? You're fighting for that next echelon. They're not going to beat Georgia. They're not going to beat Georgia Tech. They're not going to beat Georgia. So kind of carving out that next wave, that next tier of, all right, is there fans enough left to support Georgia State whilst looking at other places? And as it would be fun for folks, for the travel and things like that, I think it'd be a great thing for the city. And I think that's what I hope Saturday is. And I hope in 2 years when Georgia Tech comes to Georgia Tech or Georgia State is it's a highlight for the city of Atlanta, Metro Atlanta, kids on both rosters and state of Georgia as well. So I think should is probably the hard word there. I think more regularly would certainly be an advantage for both squads.
Any thoughts on that, RJ? You want to kind of move along?
Yeah, no, I'd just say a similar thing because there are so many connections, and you can even look at like the coaching staff at Georgia State. Like you got Chaney, you got Shear, you got Taquan Marshall, who even played at Georgia Tech. There's just so much connection between this program or these programs. It seems like it would be a good idea. I just don't know if it would be fully interesting to both sides. Georgia Tech in being, it wouldn't be great strength of schedule wise to have a group of 5 teams scheduled each year, could not help you out later in the season. And then from the perspective of Georgia State, like you're playing a team that has been very solid in the ACC for years, and that's just hard competition to go against yearly. So I would agree with you and say more often, but not annually.
Well, I guess moving off of that, it's been kind of a crazy or like a different kind of offseason at Georgia State. They've had to make a coaching hire. And obviously, way more about that than we do, kind of everything that happened there. I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on just the hire of Dell McGee and kind of what the trajectory of the program is and where do you think things go from here?
Yeah, it was certainly not what I expected. I mean, I had kind of a game plan and a framework going into spring practice 2024, and by about 5:00 in the morning on the second day of practice, I was getting text messages that, hey, there's a team meeting and something's about to go down. And that was wild. Had never been through that before. There had been some whispers a little bit earlier too. I know a lot of your folks have been asking, seen a lot of scuttle on social media. There was a lot of family factors, and they've been written, well documented there about Sean Elliott's exit. I wrote at the time, probably 2 or 3 days later, as we were talking with our staff there, I said this actually could be a good thing.
Or did we lose Ben?
Yeah, I think we lost him.
Okay, well, I'll shoot him a text, and we'll try to see if we can get Ben back. But I guess just I guess we'll just kind of take things from the Georgia Tech side. Offensively, kind of just setting the stage here for how we think they're going to approach it against Georgia State's defense. What would you like to kind of see the offense improve upon, or take things differently a little bit? And how do you want to see them kind of match up with Georgia State? And what do you want to see them do?
Yeah, we saw last week it was kind of a mix between this run heavy, very trickery based, like Buster Faulkner again, had one of his great game plans that we've seen throughout his time at Tech. And I thought it was a very solid game plan. I think it's going to look a little different against Georgia State because I think you're going to want to get out early. And this Georgia State defense really struggled against the pass last year. I don't know how great they're going to be against the pass this year. They don't really have a ton of mass up front. So I think the key is going to be, dominate on the offensive line, which you did pretty well against Florida State. I see no reason why you couldn't do that against Georgia State. It might look a little different. I think the passing game is going to be more heavy. I think they're going to give Haynes King a lot of opportunities, and I think this will be the game kind of where you see what he can do throughout the year, because obviously he had some problems last year, and maybe giving him the full reins, seeing how he can perform, with the offense.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think the things I want to see carry over is obviously no turnovers. Like that was a huge factor in last week's game. I think you're going to be able to see more explosiveness from the passing game this week. Ventrell Cypress is not on the other side of the field in the secondary. They don't have the talent that Florida State had at corner, obviously. So I do think that, we talked about it last week, and we weren't even like it's extremely nitpicking because they weren't trying to go out there and throw the ball all around on Florida State. But you didn't really see many explosive plays come through the pass game. You had the completed screen there early in the game to Malik Rutherford, and he took that a little bit. But you didn't see anything like super downfield. The only other really downfield play I can remember was the shot to Eric Singleton, which wasn't completed. But mostly it was a lot of screens. You had a lot of intermediate stuff. You had the big third down plays and whatnot. But I do think getting more explosiveness in the passing game just to show you can do it. Like, hey, we can do this and everything. I think that's going to be huge. And I think we got our guy back. Welcome back, Ben.
Hey, sorry about that, fellas. The iPhone got a little warm here. That's trouble with doing stuff remotely. But no, basically what I was saying before. I mean, the hire of Dell McGee was tremendous, just simply because Georgia State was the only FBS job available. Right, it was the only one that was open. I could probably, with some level of confidence, say that if this job was open the following December, or even the previous December, I'm not sure Dell McGee would have been super interested in it. His son, Austin McGee, committed and signed with the Panthers. But, if he was looking for a job and was leaving, Kirby Smart's staff in Athens, Austin could have followed him, no problem. Well, fast forward to the end of February, he has certainly, assembled a tremendous staff. Jim Chaney on the OC, DC, Kevin Shearer, go up and down the list. Damian Craig at wide receiver coach, running back coach Will Healy, who helped start the Charlotte program. Carter Blunt, special teams, up and down all around, and even doubling basically the recruiting staff, doubling the analyst staff. Just really, really, demanding resources that Georgia State, frankly, had never had before. So, adding 40 plus new players since he arrived in February has been wild and kind of head spinning, but here we are in the portal era, and the 2025 class is off to just a spectacular start as well. The class currently is ranked 68th in the country according to 247Sports, and it's number 2 in the group of 5, only behind South Florida. So he's doing a heck of a job. Now we got to see the results on the field, and as I've told Georgia State fans pretty much the entire offseason, one game's not going to define Dell McGee and this program either. There's 12 full games we've got to see with that. And we know the Sun Belt, man, it's a meat grinder. There's a lot of really good programs that we saw last year with James Madison, App State. Georgia Southern has been historically good. We've seen Louisiana, Raging Cajuns, and teams like Troy, come up and bite somebody. So every week there's really no off weeks in the Sun Belt. And I know a lot of folks, especially those who follow Georgia Tech and the ACC, are not necessarily, and I don't blame them, following the Sun Belt week in, week out, right? So, Dell wants to come in there and win. He's already raised over $300,000 in NIL money since he's arrived too. So that's another big factor on keeping some of these kids in the Metro Atlanta area. But he had a phone call with the high school coaches. One of the first weeks I think he was hired. all 250, 300 high school coaches all around the state and said, listen, we're going to recruit two places. We're going to recruit the state of Georgia and the city of Atlanta, and that's our focus. And he's to this point absolutely led to that promise, and it's resulted so far in some pretty strong results off the field. Now it comes down to whether the team can put it together on the field.
Well, I guess let's start to get into what we're going to see on the field, because I've just been fascinated, because like I've had people ask me, like, what do you expect to see out of Georgia State this week, and what do you think they're going to look like? And my answer is I don't know. I really don't know. I obviously there's a little familiarity with some, like I know some of the coordinators, like Jim Chaney being at Georgia. He was an analyst at Georgia Tech, been at Tennessee, like he's familiar. I guess, you've probably been asked a gazillion times about the quarterback thing. Took a number of, was it 4 quarterbacks through the transfer portal? Is that right?
Yeah, so you had Zach Gibson and Christian Veillere, which I'm learning how to pronounce his name, the Canada native. So those are kind of the two that you see kind of jump off the page initially, and they were on the depth chart that was released sort of kind of if you turn your head sideways by the school this week. But then you also go out and get Kyle Lowe from Middle Tennessee State. He didn't throw a lot of passes, in Murfreesboro, but he's a freak show athlete, big-time track athlete. And that's the biggest thing ultimately, talking to Dale through spring, talking to them and through fall, is ultimately the best 11 for that specific play or scheme is going to be on the field. So, I can't tell you how many guys are going to take snaps, because we can see some, whether, what folks want to call gadget plays or what used to be the old Wildcat. I don't know. I mean, we are going to see a variety of things. And it's also an opportunity, I think, for this staff to lay it out on the table, right? You got nothing. You go for broke in week 1. You're playing a city team. Dell mentioned it in his press conference on Tuesday that look, you want the guys to go out and have fun. They know they're big underdogs. They were all watching, the game there on Saturday early afternoon, watching Tech beat Florida State. They want to go and have an opportunity, and I'm sure a lot of these kids that certainly were, from Metro Atlanta or even the state of Georgia, may feel in some kind of way that, hey, maybe they were good enough to get a look from Tech and never did. So there's an inherent kind of chip on their shoulder for that. But I think the storylines, somebody especially who grew up and is able to write on a daily basis. I mean, Zach Gibson. I mean, come on, man. He had the opportunity there at Tech, returns back to his native Metro Atlanta kid from Alpharetta. Obviously got passed there by Haynes King and really even Zach Pyron, right? So he wasn't going to be second, probably even third on the depth chart this year. Goes to Georgia State. He had already committed to Sean Elliott and the Panthers already, so he was going to be here one way or the other. Sean Elliott leaves. Here comes Dell McGee. All right, well, what is the offense going to look like? How is that going to change? But the interesting thing, talking to not only Dell about Jim Chaney, but even Ryan Williams, the quarterback coach. Ryan Williams has been actually signaling the plays in for the University of Georgia for 5 years. So he has an extreme level of game planning experience. Guy that, played at Memphis, played at Miami. The combination there between Chaney and Williams, really seeing, kind of how those offensive minds come together. Is going to be a lot of fun to kind of watch and develop with this team. But yeah, I mean, I think if I had to lean, just because I covered college football as long as, and you guys have been around it, coaches tend to lean toward experience, right? I think this would be the 26th or 27th start for Zach Gibson if he is indeed a starter. Veillere hasn't started that much, and I'm not going to go crazy either, because I've looked at every single game he played against Pitt. He played 6 games, man. Like Pitt offensively was not very good. So, you look at it and you're going, all right, I'm not making sweeping judgments because the offensive line wasn't good. Game planning wasn't good. And, he's basically arriving in Atlanta as essentially a sophomore. So I do think Gibson plays and starts. We'll see if that happens over the course of, the 75, 80 plays or so in the game. And if there's other guys that take snaps.
You got any questions on that, RJ? Or
do you think it's possible that throughout the season we see a guy be cut out as the starter, or do you think this 2 quarterback system is going to stay throughout the year?
It's interesting. I don't. I've talked to Dell about that specifically, and he answered it some in fall. He was kind of being evasive, which he's got no reason to tell any of us what he really wants to do or what his staff was. But I think he's still also trying to evaluate it. I think the unique part about it, him coming in spring and trying to figure out, all right, what looks good, what doesn't, and then be able to figure out what his needs were going into the transfer portal helped, because, obviously he felt he needed to add some additional bodies and things that way. But, ultimately, I think you kind of have to ride out and figure out what you want. I will tell you, the Georgia State schedule in the first month is very challenging. You've got a top 10 FCS team coming in Chattanooga, who, as important as this game is, Georgia State playing Georgia Tech in week 1, Chattanooga is going to have the same mindset. They're going to say, hey, I'm going to try to catch the Panthers slipping, win or loss off a physical game against a Power 5 opponent. And then the following week, here comes Vanderbilt. They come to Center Parc Stadium in Atlanta. You're hosting an SEC team. And I know folks have jokes about Vanderbilt being an SEC team. They still recruit SEC-level athletes. I hate to break it to everybody. So guys that would definitely start in the Sun Belt. So that's going to be difficult. But, he's not shying away from it. And then, of course, you got the rivalry game against Jackson's alma mater down there in Statesboro. They're coming up. So that's a big one as well. And, oh, by the way, that's where Dale McGee coached. So he's got extreme familiarity with that program as well. So a lot of fun. I don't think I don't think that this is going to be a scenario where you have multiple quarterbacks, but we'll see.
So I guess I just want to kind of talk about the offense as a whole. We don't have to go position by position for 20 minutes, but, there's new faces at running back, new transfer additions, same thing at receiver. Kind of what are you looking at kind of offensively as a whole at those positions? Obviously, offensive line, are you going to see the same 5 offensive line? Is there going to be a lot of rotation? Just kind of, I guess, take us through the offense and kind of what you're expecting.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's going to go be pro style. The running back room has been impressive, even though it looks like, at least reading from the initial depth chart, there's some guys banged up. It's very experienced. At quarterbacks we mentioned, C.J. Beasley was a guy that came over from Coastal Carolina, played pretty much 4 years there for Coastal Carolina, had some injuries. Jordan Ford is another guy that's super talented. Savion Wilkerson, Colorado last year, and wasn't utilized a ton. And then Freddie Brock, who, no big deal, just was the MVP of the bowl game last year, racked up, 276 yards on 24 carries. So, their experience there, their experience outside as well. There were some really, really interesting wide receivers brought in, some significant size. They went down to Valdosta State in the Division II ranks and go grab a 6'3", 6'4" wide receiver there, go to the junior college ranks and finding another big body receiver. Then you got Kadarius Thompson, who caught 2 touchdowns last year in the bowl game as well. So you got skill guys that are back. The offensive line really is the question, I just think. I mean, there's so many guys that, so much transition there from 2023. You got a couple guys that have played, but ultimately, there was a couple guys that started, their career. Malik McNeil went to Penn State, for example, to play tackle positions. Will Larkin started at Indiana. Now he's kind of dropping down to the group of 5. So, you just kind of see how that adjustment goes. And as we know, along the line, man, you got to have cohesion. You got to have injury luck, and it all starts up front, as a coach told me very long ago. So your offense can have the nicest skill position players, but if your O-line ain't working, you're in deep trouble.
What would you say is the strength of the offense? Like, what unit do you feel most confident about going into Saturday?
Probably wide receiver, just simply because of the talent, and probably it'd be either wide receiver or running back, just because there's experience there. It was interesting when the initial depth chart popped that it was Michael Dukes who had limited opportunities with South Florida. And that's the other side too, is Del McGee's a running backs coach, right? He's been a running backs coach his entire time he's been in college. So, you kind of trust his eval there. He's sitting in on every single meeting. If not leading that running back room, he's going to know what personnel can run what he wants to do the best. So I'm fascinated to see that. I tend to kind of lean wide receivers just because you got some experienced guys. But, I mean, running back's talented. And as we can see, that's the one position that, ultimately – you can come in and impact the game right away, whether you have experience or not.
You got any other offensive questions, RJ? Are you ready to move on to the other side of the ball?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I have a question, but I would say I am pretty excited about the running back room, and I think that's the position on Georgia State next year where you have the highest ceiling, because you have so many guys that have performed either at Georgia State or at other schools, and I feel like there's just so much potential at that position, which could help Georgia State if they want to make a run at the Sun Belt later in the year, because there are so many talented players at the running back position.
Well, I guess moving on to defense, again, a lot of new faces on there, new coordinator, new coaches. I guess just kind of give us a rundown, what you're expecting, which group stands out to you, where there could be some concerns, and just let you take it from there.
Yeah, fascinated by the defensive line right up the middle. That was a major concerted effort by the Panthers coaching staff this offseason. Went and got significantly larger on the defensive line and up the middle. got really a lot of 1 year transfers, guys that were kind of like in their last year of eligibility, trying to make that last kind of push there to get some good tape to try to play professionally or just finish out their career. I think the secondary is one of those where it probably is the strength here. Just looking at it, you got a returnee in Gavin Pringle, who moved up from Bucknell to be an All Sun Belt guy last year. Extremely well skilled and sound guy. Jeremiah Johnson came up from the junior college ranks as well. Really tough physical safety in the back third, and old friend for Tech fans is Kenyatta Watson. He's going to be playing against his former practice mates as well, so his teammates. So interested to see where he fits in, and the Panthers have already kind of announced a nickel back as well, and Jaron Gilmore, who moved up from Tennessee Tech. Very not the biggest defensive back, and that's the other thing you'll see in Sunbelt schools is you're not going to get the guys with the huge measurables for the most part, but you're going to have very sound tacticians. You're going to have guys that can get out just because of Sunbelt. Ultimately, they have a lot of spread offenses. They want to throw the ball over the place, so it's going to be fascinating. But I think the one thing where their strength on this team is going to be that defensive secondary, and I especially after the game planning and game scheming that we saw in Dublin the other night, I would have to imagine Tech wants to throw the ball some, at least more than what they did on Saturday against Florida State.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll get you out of here on this. We know you got to go. If Georgia State is to hang around, and who knows what could happen at the end of the game, pull the upset or just keep it closer than expected, what do they got to do?
I think honestly, turn the jackets over. I think that's a big thing there where where the score gets sideways or closer. Is going to be turnover margin. They've got to hold on to the football. Georgia State is traditionally, at least under Sean Elliott, and I would imagine Dell's the same way. They got to control the ball, got to control the clock. You want to run the ball. They're not going to maybe run the ball as well as Tech normally has and does. But you can't go 3 and out multiple times. As we saw in Dublin, there was only 14 total possessions with the new clock rule. So I think you got to score, and you got to score touchdowns. That's the one thing that we saw. Georgia State upsetting Tennessee, scored 38 points. You went into Auburn and had a lead, 21 points in the first half. That's kind of the methodology. You have to have some breaks. You have to have a C- or D+ type effort in some areas, and I think that's what it's going to require. Anybody else thinking that talent for talent that Georgia State and Georgia Tech are the same is probably delusional or probably drinking that new branded Georgia State ale that just dropped a couple weeks ago.
Well, we appreciate it, Ben. We know you're a busy guy. Thank you for coming on. Whenever, I'm sure we'll have you on again at some point, but we really appreciate you taking your time out to join us today.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Enjoyed it. Y'all take care.
All right, see you, Ben. All right, well, if you didn't know anything about Georgia State before, you should now. That was good. We really appreciate Ben coming on to talk about that. But I guess let's get back to the Georgia Tech part of this. We kind of were branching off there a little bit, when we lost Ben there for a half second. Just going back to Haynes King did a phenomenal job last week just doing the game plan and not turning the ball over. But I would like to see, obviously you got to continue that. But look, Ben just took the words right out of my mouth. I do think they're going to maybe want to show some more in the passing game, because it's not that Georgia Tech is just a run-heavy team that can't. We don't know if they can throw it. It's a question mark. We know they can. We saw it last year. There was plenty of chances last year. I just want to see them be able to do it against a team that, I don't think they can cover Tech's athletes at receiver. I just don't think that there's anything about that matchup that suggests Georgia State is going to be able to stop them. I think Tech could run for as many yards as they want to. They just pushed around a team with 4 NFL players on its defensive line. And look, you might think Florida State's defensive line is overrated. That's fine. All 4 of those guys are probably going to get drafted. So they're still, in terms of what you're going to see on Saturday, it's just exponentially better. So I do expect them to just be able to win the line of scrimmage and be able to run as much as they want to. I just think I would like to see some explosion in the passing game and not turn the ball over on offense. You got any other thoughts there?
Yeah, the only thing I would want to add is I just don't want to see it be a boring offense. I think it's very probable that Georgia Tech runs the football down Georgia State's throat for 4 quarters of the ballgame, and I think Georgia Tech wants to get away from that, because I think this is one of the games early on the schedule where you have a defense that is experienced at the FBS level, and it's not like you're playing VMI. Georgia State is a quality school, quality football school. So I think this is your time to experiment. This is your time to see how your pass plays work, because you're going to see a lot of defenses similar to Georgia State maybe have, you know, bigger guys, stronger guys, but a similar style of defense. So I'm just looking to see what Eric Singleton can do in this game. I'm looking to see how they can game plan the pass, because we know what we're going to see from Jamal Haynes. We know this offensive line is going to be great. I just want to see, you know, how Eric Singleton can play in this game. And the entire receiving core, really.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, you know, I got a lot of questions about Trey Cooley. Key is hopeful he's going to play Saturday. He was listed on the depth chart. Now, take that with a grain of salt. It doesn't definitely mean he's going to play. You know, he got banged up on the opening kickoff of the game the other day. Chad Alexander, he stepped up and took the bulk of the carries behind Jamal Haynes. I'm kind of interested to see, does that follow through? If Cooley's healthy, does he take the second most snaps behind there? Now, Haynes took like a large portion of the snaps. Like, this wasn't like a 60-40 thing. It was bigger than that. But just kind of seeing if they mix some different running backs in there. And I'm sure, look, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but if the game does get out of hand, I would like to see some of those other guys like Anthony Carey or Evan Dickens get in the game and carry the football a little bit. But, again, don't want to get ahead of myself. So I just think the game plan is don't turn the ball over, be explosive in the passing game. You know what you can do running the ball.
Yeah, and I think you, again, to reiterate, like, you're going to experiment in this game. Like, we saw Chad Alexander. Like, he was amazing last game, frankly.
He was good, yeah.
Looked very good. I just you're going to get a chance to play some guys that aren't necessarily starting, and I want to see what we can get out of them.
Yep. I guess let's just obviously going to move over to defense. I don't think we could have expected more or expected better than what we got last week. I mean, every level was good. Not perfect. Now they didn't play a perfect game, but I mean, look, you're going to face a big downgrade in terms of talent. I think in this game it's just tackle well, force turnovers, because I do think, you know, I want to say this just because I don't know if he's going to start or not. Like, I'm appreciative of what Zach Gibson did at the end of the 2022 season. I imagine most Tech fans are, you know, coming in, you know, being able to win that game against North Carolina after, you know, Sims and Pyron were hurt, played admirably against the Georgia team that, you know, won the national title by like 80,000 points. So I do want to say that, like, you know, big shout out to Zach Gibson, especially if he starts this game. But both of those quarterbacks, when you look at the numbers, are very turnover prone. And I just don't know how they're going to block Georgia Tech. And I'm not sitting here trying to say Georgia Tech's defensive line after one game is all of a sudden amongst the 2 or 3 best in the ACC, but just in terms of what Georgia State's going to roll out there, because that's just when I heard him talk about the offensive line and, you know, looking at things, like I have a very big question about that. So I think Tech can really control the line of scrimmage there. I could see them trying to run some like gadget or explosive plays early in the game, meaning Georgia State, like just try to create something. I don't know, just try to, you know, catch Georgia Tech napping, I guess is what I'm trying to get at, and just try to hit an explosive play, run something they're not expecting. Because again, if Georgia Tech doesn't turn the ball over, and, you know, there's no hangover from the win and coming back from Ireland, like, this game probably shouldn't be close, to be honest with you. I guess just what are you looking for from the defense?
Yeah, I'm just looking for really the same guys that made an impact last game to make the same impact this game, because Georgia Tech, in all honesty, probably has better athletes on defense than Georgia State has athletes on offense. And you had a lot of guys that made a big impact last game. You had Amari Harvey, who made some huge tackles last game. You had LaMiles Brooks, you had Clayton Powlee, Kevin Harris, Kyle Eiford. So many of these players stepped up against an offense that's very versatile, has a ton of talent, has a ton of speed, strength on the offense. So I think just sticking with the game plan is going to be key, because Georgia State, they are going to try to, you know, make this game difficult for you. And we've said this a million times, like, this is their Super Bowl. They're going to take every chance that they can to score against this defense. You know, maybe one thing they saw is a vulnerability. Maybe it's a trick play. Maybe it's, you know, here and there. Like, they're going to find yardage, because This is obviously a big game, but I think the key is just stick to the game plan, keep what's ahead of you. Don't think you've won the game before the game is over. I think that's the key. And, I think it could be smooth sailing if Georgia Tech plays how you want to play through the first three.
Yeah, I mean, and I think just, again, stopping the run and tackling is still going to be paramount in this game because while I agree with Ben that I think the receivers for Georgia State are pretty talented, actually, and I can see them making some plays. I think if you get them down early, take away the run game, you tackle well, your run fits are good and sound like they were last week after that first drive against Florida State, you're going to put them in a position where they have to throw the ball. And then I think that's where, Romello Height turns loose. That's where Sylvain turns loose, Kevin Harris. And, I kind of want to see how the rotation splits up again because a lot of guys played on the defensive line. Look, PFF is not the gospel. It's not everything. But if you go look at the snap numbers and stuff, it does give you an idea and kind of how they wanted to rotate some guys. We saw Jordan Vandenberg, Thomas Gore get in there. I want to see maybe some young guys. I know they didn't play much in the last game, but two of the freshmen that Brent Key has mentioned a lot through fall camp, Jordan Boyd and Amontre Bradford. I kind of want to see maybe if they get in there and get some snaps as well because I think those guys could be factors towards the end of the year as some young talents. Look, we saw Tajay Butler. He played some. He had a big tackle for loss there in the first half of the game. I kind of want to see maybe if he gets more snaps because Eford and Trinilius Tatum kind of dominated the snap count at linebacker. Then you had E.J. Lightsey and Tajay Butler come in there for some snaps. And then the defensive backfield, just, if there's anything different about the rotation there. Anything else as far as defense goes?
I think we covered it.
Okay. I guess this, the end of the show is where we kind of give, we've broken down what we think Georgia State's going to look like, what we know about Georgia Tech and how we think they're going to attack them. There's just a lot of unknowns in this game as far as what Georgia State's going to do and, everything. And I think, when you're 21.5-point favorite, it's hard to really, you're the better team on paper. And look, the only way this game should be close, in my opinion, just to kind of give my final thoughts on it, is if they are, drinking their own Kool-Aid about the Florida State win, and if they are not focused and they are taking them super lightly and they come out and turn the ball over. Look, that's what happened against Bowling Green last year is, they got down early and then they started turning the ball over, which made it a lot worse. Again, I'm not trying to bring up Bowling Green a ton, but I think that's kind of what you have to look at. It was a 21-point spread too last year. I think this team is much better and much more capable of handling this kind of situation. But that's also what I want to see. One of the most underrated things about good teams is they suffocate the life out of teams that they are just much better than. There's, you can discount wins against easy teams and say, well, you should have beat the crap out of them. But a lot of times in college football, sometimes that doesn't happen. You can point to Middle Tennessee beating Miami a couple of years ago. You can point to all these kind of things of where teams come out and just disappoint. And then, all of a sudden you lose. One of the hallmarks of good teams is coming out and handling your business against these kind of teams. And if Georgia Tech comes out here and dominates Georgia State start to finish, I do think there is a little something you can take from that. I'm being completely honest with you. I don't think Georgia State is very good, to be honest. I don't think that they're going to be very good, just to be, completely blunt about it. But I do think if you come out here and handle your business, you don't show any signs of a hangover from a big win, and you play a clean game and don't turn the ball over, that to me shows you're focused and you took this opponent seriously, and then now you're ready to go on the road and play Syracuse.
Yeah, and I think if you come out in this game, cover the spread, and just generally play Georgia State really good, I think that's the way Georgia Tech gets ranked, assuming Florida State doesn't melt down against Boston College. I just think this game is pretty big. I mean, obviously there's a ton of games heading into the season, but we have seen this game labeled as a trap game all throughout the offseason. Even from spring, Georgia State fans, Georgia State coverage, national coverage, they all realize that, this could be a hard game, especially coming off your flight from Dublin. But I just think your key is staying confident, but also keeping things in their place, because a lot of times you see teams come off a very big win or come off a game against a very big team where you spend a lot of time game planning against that team and just completely underperform. But I think this Georgia Tech team is focused, and I think Brent Key has put an emphasis on treating each opponent like they're a top team, like treating every single opponent like it's the college football playoff. And I think he's done a great job of rallying the troops, and I think he's frankly an amazing coach at that. And, I guess we'll see how that turns out on Saturday.
Well, and, he was asked, he made a similar point. Somebody asked him, hey, this is Georgia State Super Bowl. They've been wanting this opportunity to play Georgia Tech. And then he kind of cut them off and was like, hey, this is our Super Bowl too. This is the game we're playing this week. This is our Super Bowl too. So I like to hear that. Now it's just, I got to see it. And I think we will. Just to give my final prediction on it, when you're looking at potential upsets and things teams can do, as underdogs, where is the advantage for Georgia State, even potentially? Like, there's nothing, even if things go well, they're going to have an advantage at, unless the defensive performance last week was just a complete fluke, which I just don't think it was. Like, I just don't see a way in which Florida State can't move the ball on Georgia Tech, but all of a sudden this Georgia State team can. Like, I guess that's, if you want to get theoretical about, what advantages they could have, that could be it, I guess. But I just don't see how Georgia State can really hang around in this game for a long period of time. I'm not going to, I hate predicting big spreads. They're really picking against the spread in general. I'm terrible at it. So don't follow my advice on that. But I do think this game will never be in doubt. I don't think there's going to be a question of who the better team is. I think Georgia Tech will come out and handle their business on Saturday and get a big win. If you force me to give a score prediction, I'll say 47-17.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I just don't know if Georgia Tech is going to score that big amount of points, just frankly being the foot might be off the gas pedal in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and it who knows? Maybe they just come out and say, hey, we know we can dominate them up front on the offensive line and just have a huge advantage there. And they just control the clock, low possession game. I do think that they're going to try to hit some explosives in the passing game, which is why I put my score up a little higher than I normally would have, because I agree they're going to be a lower possession team, so you're not going to see a ton of 45, 50-burger type games. But I do think they're going to make it a point to try to score some points in this game. So interested to see what happens. Anything else that we've missed about this game? Yeah, anything?
Yeah, I'll throw my score prediction in there. I'll say 38-13. But I don't have full confidence in it. I think Georgia Tech will cover. It's just there's no saying what the score could be. Like, Georgia Tech could easily score 30 points, but they could also drop maybe upwards of 50. Like, it's just going to depend on the nature of the game.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I hate picking against big spreads, we see it all the time. Tech could be leading by 24, 25 points the whole time, and then all of a sudden Georgia State scores with 2 minutes left in the game, and Tech only wins by 18, and it looks like the score is much closer than it is. Like, things like that. Like, I think Tech comes out, handles their business. This game is wrapped up by early third quarter, realistically, and then, maybe we see some rotation guys come in. But I am actually very anxious to see what Georgia State looks like. I'm not being I'm not lying at all, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, I really am anxious to see what they look like, and I'll be kind of keeping an eye on them as the season goes on, because I'm kind of fascinated by the Dell McGee hire and what he can do at Georgia State. I know that was a tough situation, just a wild situation, really, of what they had to do. So any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think even if McGee doesn't have a ton of success this year, I think he'll be at Georgia State for a long time.
I think there's potential for that as well. Well, that's going to do it for the Georgia State preview, guys. We really appreciate Ben coming on. There's nobody knows Georgia State better than he does, and he gave a great rundown of their team. Be sure to follow him on social media. As always, guys, I wanted to mention that we should have led the show off with this. We asked for 400 subscribers, and we got 400 subscribers.
Almost immediately, too.
Subscribers. Yeah, we cannot thank you guys enough for the support you show this channel and the growth we've been able to experience and everything. We love being able to make this content for you guys. It's we love seeing the support, and we want to keep continuing because I'm going to challenge you again. Let's see how long it takes us to get to 500 subscribers. Like that's the next benchmark and what we're going to try to do. Obviously, if you're watching this and haven't subscribed, I highly recommend hitting that subscribe button. You're going to get a lot of content, especially now the season is in full gear. Like the video, same thing on podcast form. Leave us a review, 1 star, 5 stars. We just want to hear what you guys think of the show and everything. Really appreciate everybody listening in. We're going to be back Saturday. It's going to be a late one. Like it's, I will be there. I wasn't able to be in Dublin. Of course, we were able to get, our instant thoughts up a little bit quicker, but we will be back late Saturday. I'm guessing most of y'all will probably tune in early Sunday morning, but if you stay up Saturday night and listen to me and RJ talk some Georgia Tech, Georgia State, we appreciate it. But that's going to be our next show. RJ, anything else before we get out of here?
That's all I got.
All right, man. Well, we appreciate you guys listening, and we will see you on Saturday night.